Thank you very much. Good morning. It's the 26th of October and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting for Ipswich City Council. It is now 9:02. I call attendance for this. Today we have myself, Councillor Kunzman, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Fechner, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Tully, Councillor Jonick. We've had notification from Councillor Madsen. I think he'll be here in 10 to 15 minutes. And we have a previous leave of absence for this council meeting for Council Island that was approved by this council on the 14th of September. I'll now hand over to Councillor Kunzman for an acknowledgement of country.
Thank you, Chair. Ipswich City Council acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet on behalf of the citizens of Ipswich. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging leaders.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kunzman. I'm quite delighted this morning for our opening prayer to be conducted by Pastor Laith Greenway from the Bundamba Salvation Army Church. Good morning. I'll just get to press the button. Oh, thank you. Do you want me to get you to introduce yourself, your church, and I invite you to provide an opening prayer.
Sure. My name's Laith Greenaway and I, with my wife, look after the Bundamba Salvation Army. It's my privilege to be here this morning. Let's pray together. Father God, we come before you this morning to pray for your blessing on this council and on the city of Ipswich. We thank you for each person in this meeting and for all who invest their time and energy in the service of our community. Although our focus today is local, we cannot help but be affected by the challenges of communities near and far. Local neighbours dealing with loss from bushfires, through to countries engaged in active conflict. As we face these moments, we are reminded that if we are to flourish, we need leaders who will make good decisions. Leaders who will help us navigate the challenges in front of us. We recognise that the situations we face are complex, where it is not always easy to discern the right thing to do. So we pray that as our local leaders gather here today, that your Spirit will guide their deliberations. We pray that you will bless our councillors with wisdom, with grace and courage to faithfully fulfil their calling for the benefit of all people in the city of Ipswich. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Laith. We now move on to item 5, which are condolences. And we have 3 condolence motions for 4 people, and we do have some people in the public gallery from the families here. The first condolence motion this morning is for William Bill Hayden, AC. So William Bill Hayden, AC. By any measure, Bill Hayden led a remarkable life of service, has left an enduring legacy in our country. He was born in 1933, the first child of Violet Quinn and George Hayden. His background, he said, was, to quote, absolutely bog Irish, but with family on both sides of the Catholic Protestant sectarian divide of the time. Violet's family was from North Queensland. George was an Irish-American merchant seaman who had arrived and stayed in Australia during the First World War. Bill was born as the Great Depression raged and wrecked across the world, forcing families from their homes, businesses into ruin, and millions into poverty. Australia was one of the worst-stricken countries, with unemployment peaking at 32% in the months before Bill's birth. His parents, he said, were busted by it. George Hayden lost his small musical instrument repair shop and never fully recovered. Though George never stopped seeking work to support the family, the unremitting hardships and humiliations of the Depression worsened his drinking and the violence he frequently inflicted on his wife and children. For the growing Hayden family, life in South Brisbane was tough, money scarce, and the chance of a better life through a good education seemed unobtainable. Survival, Bill said, came ahead of pride. Later, he would say that the human anguish of the Great Depression was probably the greatest single influence shaping my personal and political values, igniting a burning resentment at the injustice of all. Bill began his schooling at St Ida's Convent School in Dutton Park, but when the school rescinded his father's contract to tune the school's pianos, his father transferred him to Dutton Park State School. He attended Brisbane State High School, leaving at 16 to become a junior clerk within the Queensland Public Service. He found the work tedious and repetitive. At 18, he undertook national service training in the Navy before joining the Queensland Police. This is an opportunity, Bill said, for great personal freedom of judgment and authority to do good. Bill served for 8 years, stationed first at Roma Street, then Woolloongabba, then Mackay. Police work wasn't tedious, but it was often brutal and challenging. Bill was frequently called to domestic violence situations, and I quote from him, "Friday nights were the ones we dreaded the most," he said. "Most of the same addresses and the same experiences." Time and again, over and over, he saw people, especially women and children, trapped by poverty and lack of opportunity and stifled by social inequality. These experiences, he said, made him feel, and I quote, a great anger at the injustices some people had to bear. In 1957, he was transferred to Redbank Station and then to Ipswich in 1960. He made an impression on his new community, particularly when he rode his police horse into the public bar of the Kerwick Hotel in Redbank and climbed the bar pole before a crowd of cheering patrons. Years later, Bill remembered, and I quote him, "There was a steel pole in the corner and we used to have competitions climbing up it after a few beers," before adding, "It could be a bit hazardous at times." And in turn, his new community made life-changing impressions on him. The first, in 1957, he joined the local Labor Party. The second, the fateful day he met Dallas Broadfoot, a coal miner's daughter from the Dinmore, New Chum area, walking in Ipswich, and decided she was the woman he wanted to marry. After a year of courtship, Dallas agreed and they married in 1960. They would be partners in life for the next 63 years. "Without our marriage," Bill said, "I would have been a much lesser person. For this marriage and a family gave me a reason to exist beyond the narrow, self-centred confines by which I lived to this point." But he wanted more. Restless about his future, driven to learn and hungry to make a bigger contribution, he completed his high school by correspondence, with Dallas lending him the money to buy the textbooks. Needing to know more and be more, and with a growing understanding of the fundamental link between economics and social change, he began studying economics part-time through the University of Queensland. Then life took an unexpected turn for the young policeman and his new wife. Aged just 28, Bill contested the 1961 federal election as the Labor Party candidate for the electorate of Oxley, which at the time included much of Ipswich. It was a long shot. Labor hadn't represented the geographic area within Oxley since 1906, with the seat having been held by the well-regarded, well-known Dr. Donald Cameron, Minister for Health in the Menzies government since its creation in 1949. To complicate matters, Dr. Cameron was Dallas's family doctor and had delivered her. During the 12-month campaign, Bill and Dallas crisscrossed the electorate's 18,000 square kilometres in their second-hand green FJ Holden, standing on its bonnet to hammer in election posters into power poles or pull a PA system out from the boot to speak at street corners, before returning each night to their rented home in Dinmore. On election morning, heavily in debt and with the FJ on its last legs, Bill was certain he'd bitten off more than he could chew. Then, to the surprise of the nation, Bill won. He was among the youngest members elected to Parliament. His first trip to Canberra was also his first plane flight. He would spend his first years as the member for Oxley on the opposition bench and was elevated to the front bench in 1969. After many years of part-time study, that year he also achieved the Bachelor of Economics degree. He began as a copper and completed it as a parliamentarian. When the Whitlam government was elected in 1972, Bill was appointed Minister for Social Security. He was a pragmatic and reforming minister, establishing, against fierce opposition, Australia's first national universal healthcare system, then called Medibank, which later became, and remains today, Medicare. He introduced Australia's first single mother's pension, which helped women and children trapped in the desperate, helpless circumstances he'd so often encountered as a police officer. In 1975, in the last months of the Whitlam government, he was appointed Treasurer. He became Labor leader after the 1977 election defeat, rebuilding the party and laying the foundations of Labor's economic and social policies that readied it for government. Under Bill, Labor narrowly lost the 1980 election, but was back within striking distance of regaining government. Ahead of the 1983 election, He resigned as Labor leader and was appointed Foreign Minister in the incoming Hawke government. As Foreign Minister, he was a strong advocate of Australia's role in the Asia-Pacific and for closer ties with our Asian neighbours. In 1989, he resigned as the member for Oxley after 28 years to become the 21st Governor-General of Australia. He was made a companion within the Order of Australia, AC, the same time, and served as Governor-General until 1996. Returning to Queensland, he and Dallas moved to their rural home in Bryden, just outside Ipswich. He continued to be active in public and political life and was always interested in the big ideas that could improve our country and better the lives of its people. On the 21st of October 2023, Bill Hayden passed away aged 90 after a long illness. Those who knew Bill spoke of his compassion, intellect and work ethic. They spoke of his fundamental decency and fairness, shaped by his childhood, the Depression and the police force. He was a hero to many and often described as perhaps the best Prime Minister Australia never had. He lived a life of immense public service to his community and country. He was a modest man with enormous ambition for Australia, and our nation is far better for his life and for his achievements. On behalf of the City of Ipswich, I offer my sincere condolence to Bill's beloved wife Dallas, their children and family, and his many friends across Australia and Ipswich. Vale, the Honourable William Bill Hayden, AC. May he rest in peace. I now move a condolence motion for James Keenan. James Keenan will most likely be remembered by the majority in Ipswich from his work shaping the minds and souls of those attended St Edmund's College between 2008 until 2017. James started his teaching career at Haigsley State School before moving to Woodcrest College and Corinda State School before taking up his position at St Edmund's. The youngest son of Pat and Kath Keenan, he lived in Woodend, then Basin Pocket in his youth. James attended St Mary's Infant School and St Edmund's College. James's parents instilled in their children a sense of community, taught them right from wrong, and how to develop friendships and relationships. James was devoted to his Catholic faith. He was an active member of the church, and he also taught religious education. James went on to teach at Ambrose Tracy College and Shalom College, but he continued to be a loyal supporter of the St Edmund's Old Boys Association and was always proud to be an Eddie's man. He was committed to live and work in a way that inspired his students to embrace the strong men, kind men, gentle men, Eddie's men motto. James was influential in students' lives, inspiring and motivating them to achieve their potential. There is no doubt he left a lasting impression on those he taught with compassion, respect and faith, and his guidance will reverberate to the next generation of both teachers and students. His charity extended to welcoming students to his home so they may study abroad, and was named Sensei by those he protected and provided for while here in Australia extending their education. James was a devoted family man to his wife Peter Nicol and his daughters Sarah and Becky, their spouses, his grandchildren, his stepdaughter Emily, and his brothers, sisters-in-law, his niece and nephew, and his mother and father-in-law. James was a loyal friend to many. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. May James Keenan rest in peace and continue to guide those who knew him in his life. I now move a condolence motion for John Cushing OAM and his wife Una Cushing. John Cushing OAM and Una Cushing were described by those who knew them as tireless volunteers of the Ipswich community, serving others with as little fuss as possible. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a corner of the hockey community where the affectionate names Pa or Ma Cushing didn't elicit a knowing nod and smile. John attended Brassel State School and the Ipswich Technical College before joining Queensland Railways as an apprentice fitter and turner in 1949, retiring in 1995. John worked for 46 years at the railway workshops at North Ipswich, finishing in the role of foreman. John's hockey career started in 1950 and he was chosen to represent both Ipswich and Queensland over the years. He became involved in the administration as well as coaching of the sport he loved. Through the years, he undertook various leadership roles, most notably serving as president for an impressive 35 years and secretary for 18 years. For 53 years, he held these roles, which not only underscore his devotion to our community, but highlight the profound impact on the broader hockey landscape his service provided. John also umpired, officiating in over 1,000 local fixtures and was honoured with life membership of Ipswich Hockey in 1972, Eastern Suburbs Hockey Club in the late 70s, the Umpires Association in 1986 and Queensland Hockey in 1995. One of the highlights from his time with hockey was overseeing the successful move in 1993 from East Ipswich to the current 30-acre hockey complex at Briggs Road. While John may have been the heart, his wife Una was the soul. John met Una Bell, who also played hockey, of course, and they were married for almost 67 years. They had 2 daughters, Margaret and Denise, and eventually 6 grandchildren and 16 great-grandchildren. Una kept in step with John, working beside her husband in as many roles for Ipswich Hockey, including delegate, manager, president, treasurer, and she also volunteered in the canteen. Una was awarded life membership of Ipswich Ladies Hockey in 1980, and in 1993 became a life member of the Ipswich Men's Hockey Association. Una is the only person to receive the honour of life membership of both ladies and men's associations. Una received a Long Service Award from Queensland Women's Hockey Association in 1986 and an Award of Merit from the Queensland Hockey Association in 1992. Apart from hockey, they were both very active members of society and contributed wherever they could. They both took on roles at the North Ipswich Primary School, then Ipswich State High School P&C committees where their girls went to school. John was the chairman of the local Ipswich Ambulance Board for 20 years, and Una, of course, was by his side, raising funds with the Ladies Committee, and Una also coached Vigoro for many years. John was an alderman for the Ipswich City Council from 1976 to 1979, and in recognition of his service to the community, he was announced as the Ipswich Citizen of the Year in 1991. And a year later, in 1992, he was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for services to hockey in the community. No matter how busy the family became, there was a weekly family chicken dinner. It was a tradition they all found time for. These sacred family chicken dinners, complete with roast vegetables, became quite famous, and very few outside the family ever managed to wrangle an invite. Even when someone couldn't attend, John and Una would ensure a plate was sent home for them. Their family, and many in the community who met them, have so many happy memories and stories to share. Their passion and dedication to the Ipswich community was immense, and their extraordinary service has left an indelible mark. John passed away on the 29th of August, aged 89 years, and Una passed away 36 days later on the 4th of October, aged 86. Our condolences to the Cushing family and our hockey community. While they've left a huge hole in the hearts of many, they've also left a wonderful legacy and solid foundations for those who came after them and will continue to do so for many, many years. May John and Una rest in peace. Thank you. I'll now move on to item 6, which is tributes, and there are nil. I now move on to item 7, which is the presentation of petitions. This is a report concerning the submission of a petition from a resident of Goddard's Road, Yamanto, requesting the widening of the bitumen surface for surface cover on Goddard's Road between Suffield Drive and Berry Street, Yamanto. And the recommendation is that the petition be received and referred to the appropriate council department for investigation and a report back to the relevant committee. I will move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion on the matter? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. And thank you for that petition. We'll now move on to item 8, which is presentations, deputations, and there are none. So we move on to item 9, which is public participation. We have some public participation. There's Lee Elsop has requested a public participation session to request a change in the public monuments and memorials policy to include dogs, so dog parks can be allowed in dog parks. So I'll invite Lee to come to the lectern. You going to turn it on? Morning.
Hello, everybody.
Good morning. I invite you to just say your name.
My name.
And you have up to 15 minutes to speak. If you wish to speak longer, just let me know. But
I'm
thank
just
you very
very
much.
scared. That's all.
Yeah, I understand, and it is live stream, but it's very nerve-wracking. So take a deep breath, and it's all good.
Okay, what? Just talk.
Just talk. Yes.
Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Lee Alsop. I stand here today appealing for change to the current legislation to public memorials to include dogs, so dog parks can be allowed in dog parks. My 15-year-old Foxy, called Mika, is more than my pet. She's my soulmate, loyal companion and confidant. Mika has been with me on my mental health journey, helping me through some very dark times in my life. Without her, I would not be here today. When Mika was a pup, I started going to the David Coulter's Dog Park Raceview. I had no friends or family. Mika was all these things to me and my motivation to leave the house. When it was near the time to go, Mika would insist on barking and looking at me to leave, come rain, hail, shine, or my state of mind. The dog park became our second home. Over the years, Mika and I have forged strong friendships and bonds with both canines and humans, building a small community that goes on outside the dog park as well. Our four-legged babies are the glue that has brought us all together. I'm sure this has and will be the same for many other people and their dogs. When her time on this earth reaches its finality, I would like to honour her. One of the ways would be to attach a small 11.75 centimetre metal plaque to the beam on the roof on the undercover bench and seating area. I am hoping this could open the way for other people who wish to do the same for their beloved pets. Mika, my beloved dog, meets all the criteria listed to be eligible for a memorial, except for being human. My hopes are that a new legislation will be brought in to include dogs, as it would be a beautiful present to make Mika's legacy. Thank you.
Leah, thanks so much. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you. Now, in accordance with our public participation policy, we have three ways of managing public participation. One is for the matter to be received and dealt with immediately, or for the matter to be received and referred to a committee or an officer for consideration or report, or the matter just be noted and taken for no further action. I note that we have a notice of motion from Councillor Madsen at 17.1 later today on this particular matter, so I'd like to move that the matter be received and referred to later this meeting to item 17.1, the notice of motion for inclusion of plaques for dogs at dog parks. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Tully. Any discussion? No, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much, Lee. So we will be discussing this later in the meeting. Move on to item 10, which is matters of public interest, and there are none. Item 11 are the declarations of interest in matters on the agenda. And I have declarations from, I think, Councillor Fechner and Councillor Madsen. Yes, okay.
In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act, I, Councillor Fechner, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 15.6 entitled Report of Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest are my interests in both A1A Proprietary Limited and Bar Heisenberg Proprietary Limited, both located in the top of town in Ipswich. I plan on dealing with the conflict by leaving the room while the matter is discussed and voted on.
Thank you, Councillor Fickner. Councillor Madsen?
In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Jacob Madsen, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 15.6 titled Report of Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is that I was a former member of the Ipswich Trades Hall and Labour Day Committee executive until recently. I'm still involved in some handover activities. And our building, the Ipswich Trades Hall, is adjacent to Council's CBD redevelopment works. As the nature of that conflict, I'll leave the meeting while the matter is discussed and voted on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Madsen. Councillor Kunzelman?
Thank you. In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Kate Kunzelman, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 17.2 titled Notice of Motion, UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is that I am a non-executive member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which is a steering group member of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. I invite the other councillors to determine if I can continue to participate in the decision process.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just ask the CEO a question? When there's a conflict of interest, you obviously can't participate in decision making. Can you still put forward motions if it's found to have a conflict of interest? Because wouldn't that be precipitating a decision?
I would say no.
Okay.
I would say that you are still able to put forward
Okay.
a notice of motion and that it's up to the councillors to decide how to proceed with that matter.
Thank you. Councillor, may I just check, are you on the board of that organisation?
No, non-executive.
Not executive?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions of Councillor Kunzelman? Do you think you do you have a financial or personal benefit?
No, I do not.
You don't?
It's a question of conviction.
Sorry?
It's conviction, nothing else.
Okay. So I move that Councillor Kate Kunzelman participates and votes on item 17.2 entitled Notice of Motion, United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, because there is no personal financial benefit to her, and therefore a reasonable person could trust that the final decision is made in the public interest. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room, noting that Councillor Kunzelman has not voted. Thank you. Councillor Donnick.
In accordance with Section 150 ET4 of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Nicole Jonick, have a declarable conflict of interest in relation to item 5 of today's item 15.2, the report of the Governance and Transparency Committee, number 9 for 2023. I would like to leave the meeting room whilst the matter is being discussed. I have previously declared this on the original contract, and the nature of my conflict is I am an employee of River 949, and Llewellyn is one of the customers of the radio station. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think too you've done advertising for Llewellyn Motors. Would that be correct, Councillor Jonick?
I'm a casual employee for River 949.
Yes. And in that role, have you done advertising for them?
I have, yes, they're a customer of River 949.
Thank you. Thank you for that. No, thank you very much for that. Are there any other declarations of interest? No, thank you. I now move on to item 12, which is the confirmation of minutes. We have those there. Does anyone have any questions of council officers? So I'll move that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting on the 14th of September 2023 be confirmed. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any corrections, omissions, errors, amendments? No, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. We go to item 12.2, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the special meeting. Does anyone have any questions of the council officers on this? In that case, I will move that the minutes of the special meeting held on the 12th of October 2023 be confirmed. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any errors, amendments, corrections? No, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Move on to item 13, which is a mayoral minute, and I have a mayoral minute today. This mayoral minute seeks to update Ipswich City Council's regionally significant advocacy priority for waste and circular economy transformation to bring it in line with the current concerns and challenges facing the Ipswich community. I recommend that Council updates the first of its regionally significant advocacy priority for waste and circular economy transformation to, quote, partner with the Queensland Government to expedite the introduction of legislation to compel waste operators to invessel the composting of organic waste. So as a mayoral motion, it's moved and seconded, so I ask that Council's current asks are as follows: for a comprehensive review and reform of waste and resource recovery policy and infrastructure, and progress the waste sector priorities under the SEQ City Deal. So this mayoral minute proposes to replace the first component of this priority by updating the ask to partner with the Queensland Government to expedite the introduction of legislation to compel waste operators to invest in the composting of organic waste. A refinement of this priority would further bring Council's advocacy ask in line with the community need and expectations and enhance the outcomes of the Waste and Circular Economy Transformation Policy Directive as approved by this Council in December 2020 by driving industry best practice. So speaking to this, I have moved this mayoral motion today in response to the strong odours emanating from private waste operators that have been impacting Ipswich residents for many years. Council and the community have been calling on strong action from the Department of Environment and Science, Queensland's environmental regulator, for years. Since 2018, more than 26,000 complaints have been made by Ipswich residents about the negative impacts of waste operators in our region. Overwhelmingly, the most common complaint is about the ongoing odour issues our city experiences. Further exacerbating the issue is the rapid population growth our region is experiencing. Ipswich is Queensland's fastest growing city, with a population is forecast to more than double by 2046. If the waste industry and residential growth are to exist side by side, we'll need a long-term plan to ensure odour issues can be managed proactively and effectively. As we've seen with the latest odour issues, we cannot rely on the current legislation to deliver swift action for our community. Therefore, this mayoral minute proposes an update to our regionally significant advocacy priorities to advocate to the Queensland Government to introduce legislation that will phase out open-air windrows. I would like to see the state phase out this type of operation and force the upgrading of the facilities to convert to in-vesseled or enclosed structures for organic composting. The state has introduced similar legislation to successfully phase out single-use plastics using a staged approach. Based on my discussions with Minister Linnard and the Director-General of the Department of Environment and Science in the last few weeks, I believe a similar approach could work for organic composting. People have a basic right to enjoy their homes without the intrusion and offensive nuisance of waste odours. I think this motion is an opportunity for the Council and state to work together on a long-term solution to finally address this issue. I now open it up for any discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive, obviously, of the mayoral minute, but I guess I have a question regarding an update. I think it was a couple of months ago, we talked about receiving a report, a general update on the waste directive, almost health checking and looking back over the last 3 years. And, you know, your proposal is a great inclusion, but I'd like to think there might be a few other things that the council could be doing. So, yeah, I guess I'm just asking for an update on...
I'll check with the CEO. Yeah, an update on the we've asked for an update or health check of
a
the...
review of the directive,
yes.
And any proposed, you know, additions, any additional things council can be doing.
I can give an update. Thank
you,
you, Mayor. As Chair, we have been conducting internally, with internal resources, a review of progress in the implementation of the directive that was approved in December 2020. So we have done desktop analysis and spoken with officers internally. So the next step is to engage with councillors and also to engage with the relevant state department, the Department of Environment and Science, with the officers we've been working with on the joint task force, and then bring that together into a report to come back to council.
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion? I'll put them out to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Item 14 is business outstanding, and there is nil. So we move on to item 15, which are the reception of the committee reports. And the first one is 15.1, the report of the Growth Infrastructure Waste Committee. And I propose that we do this in two motions. One is to speak to item 1, and then batch items 2 to 10, if I may. So I move that item 1 from the GIW on the 12th of October, which is the response to petition setting up of an Islamic section in the Ipswich cemetery. Do I have a seconder to move that? Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. In speaking to this, I refer to an email I sent earlier. We've received some feedback from George Hatchman, who was the former president of the Willowbank Area Residents Group for over 20 years and well known in our western parts of our city. He's actually asked me to table an email from him, so I will be seeking support from you to table his email and pictures. George is very supportive and has no concern with having an Islamic section, but he states, and he's a local historian there, he states that there are pioneers and some heritage associated with that area. He just wants to make sure that that's protected and not damaged as part of the setting up of that. So I propose that we make the first recommendation here. Pardon me while I read it out. The recommendation at the GIW was that council officers continue to progress the establishment of an Islamic burial section at an Ipswich City Council managed cemetery. I propose that we add B and C, and I've sent those to you, Vicky. B, that council consults with George Hatchman, the Willowbank Area Residents Group, as part of this process in establishing the Islamic burial section, and C, that council reports back to a future GIW with the results of the consultation. I'm open to what the wording of that should be, but I just wanted to make sure that the heritage is protected there. And I'll read part of what I'll read out the email from George. I've just returned from a touring holiday and become aware of the Ipswich City Council's proposal to make the Stone Quarry Cemetery available for Islamic burials, yet I'm not aware of any previous local community consultation offered on this project. As a recognised community leader and active historian for the Willowbank, Amberley, Ebenezer and Jebrapilly local areas, I have maintained an interest in the heritage of the Stone Quarry Cemetery and was invited to consult on the future viability of this cemetery by Ipswich City Council Officer Ashley Ward on the 22nd of August 2019, just prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm quite aware of the various religious structured plot layouts with east-facing graves and the one chain surrounding easement to enable early year burial hearse and mourning parties, accessed discreetly according to faith, plus the volume of unused lots still available for future burial use. I also have good knowledge of the many historic grave sites, including those of Edward and Martha Collett, pioneer settlers whose selection Amberley eventuated into World War II RAF base Amberley. Michael and Carolyn Mack, a portion of their pioneer section was later established as the Mack Family Bush Reserve at Willowbank, which along with many other early European settlers has given cause to the recognition of this site as Pioneer Cemetery. Of note is that MP Scenic Rim John Krause's pioneer great-grandparents are also interred in this cemetery, and a pioneer Lutheran church originally lay to the south of the cemetery boundary. I'm also cognate of the fact that this cemetery was once proposed for redundancy to give way for New Hope, Jebrapilly coal mine operations circa 1970s, but this is vetoed by the then Liberal Party Premier Gordon Chalk, whose sister Sarah is buried there. The cemetery easterly background is now a bund wall from being effectively bypassed by the coal mining operations as a consequence. Given my stated interest in this cemetery, I offer my comments for consideration on this proposal. Initially, I expressed no concern for Islamic burials to occur here, as it is hallowed space where many folk of varying religious beliefs have already been laid for their eternal resting place, and they are now part of the history of our developing, vibrant, multicultural Australian community. What I do wish to register my concern is for that sincere consideration be given by the Ipswich City Council to preserve the nature of the existing Stone Quarry Cemetery burial sites for retention as a pioneer's heritage precinct in respect of our nation's early European settlers who forged their livings from their selections. In this respect, I reason that any Ipswich City Council approval for future Islamic burial sites in this location will be intended for establishing a modern Ipswich City Council general Islamic cemetery, and this will be in contrast to the nature of the existing Stone Quarry Cemetery, being that of a historic nature, with burials principally being a collective of the multiple faiths of the pioneer and successive passing folk from the local Amberley, Willowbank, Ebenezer and Jeppapilly community. With this consideration, I propose that the Islamic grave sites should be uniquely located on the vacant portion of the land to the north of the covered area and existing plots of the Stone Quarry Cemetery, and be separately identified as an Ipswich Islamic General Cemetery with a subtle demarcation to separate it from existing Pioneers section to preserve its unique heritage aspect. Attached is a corresponding email from Mr Barry Mack, also expressing a similar consideration as his pioneering forebears are also buried in this cemetery. Apart from this, I would also comment on the general disappointing visual amenity of the Stone Quarry Road, being the access and foreground to the Stone Quarry Cemetery and the disused Jeppapilly coal mine operations, as it is currently used by carhoons who have made ugly tyre marks on the road surface, plus has been used for illegal dumping of household waste, giving an overall degrading appearance to confront mourners. In conclusion, I would sincerely appreciate for Ipswich City Council to consider my above comments and also offer to be contacted if further discussion is required. Additionally, I've attached documents and images to support my comments. So may I add a recommendation D to table this email and the images that George has sent? I'll put that up there and I'll just check with the seconder, and I'm open to the wording of these added recommendations.
Yeah, I'm supportive. Yep. As long as we attach the Coro, that's great.
Yep.
For the public record.
Thank you. So as the mover and seconder support that, I'll open up these 4 recommendations up for discussion. No discussion. I'll put the matter to those 4 recommendations to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Now go to moving that Council adopt the report of the Growth Infrastructure Waste Committee on the 12th of October, items 2 to 10. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion? Highlights? Yes, Councillor Tully.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to talk to item 5.
Provisional projects?
Under the provisional projects.
Thank you.
And I'm pleased, of course, with the recommendation, which includes Divisions 2 and 4. But in Division 2, there are 4 projects which that Councillor Johnnick and myself are acutely aware of, have been requested by the community. The first is the pedestrian handrails and a pedestrian refuge, in effect, on Springfield Lakes Boulevard. That's fairly cheap, actually at $3,000. It's adjacent to the Springfield Lakes State School. I think that's an important, small, but something that will be welcomed by the community. The other is a short extension of the concrete footpath at Bruce Lane, leading the Camira Friends and Neighbours Hall for $4,000. It's only a short area, but the people who attend there tend to be, I won't say elderly, I'll say older, and it's a safety issue that the recommendation will address. The other is a man walk sign at Rebel Domain, which has been requested for, again, within the community to install the sign adjacent to Rebel Domain to encourage men to come together and to walk several times each week, with the wording of that still to be determined by council. And the other, which is a bigger one, is a contribution towards the fit out of the mezzanine floor of the Springfield Central YMCA at Springfield Central for $50,000. That is an area which hasn't been fitted out, but this will go a significantly long way to increasing the availability of services in that area under the responsibility at the moment of the Springfield Central YMCA. So I'm extremely supportive of these 4 projects within Division 2.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. Yes, on Tuesday morning I was at a breakfast meeting at Chimera, and one of the gentlemen there's from the Springfield Mo Men group, so he's very excited about the Man Walk sign as a joining point. Any other discussion on items 2 to 10? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We might move over to item 15.2, the report of the Governance and Transparency Committee of the 12th of October. I'll hand over to the Chair, Councillor Madsen, to see how I'd like this report managed.
I'd just like to move that the items be accepted with the exception of item 5 to allow Councillor Jonick to leave on that item.
Thank you. So we'll deal with items 1 through, I think it was to 17, except for 5 at first, and then we'll deal with 5 second. Is that okay?
Yeah, all items other than 5 is what's been moved, Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any discussion on those matters? Yes,
Just in
Councillor.
relation to item 15 of the governance and transparency, I'm just wanting to understand what the outcome will be from the spend for shopology.
So would you like to ask a question of a council officer?
Yeah, if I could ask for the relevant council officer. I believe Miss Marchant was the author.
I don't think she's here, but I think Mr.
Oh,
Pole. Mr.
Ben?
Pole's here.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, Ben Pole, General Manager, Community, Cultural and Economic Development.
Councillor Jonick, may I answer your question?
Thanks, Mr. Pole. Just in relation to this procurement item, what are we looking at specifically as an outcome from this contract?
So we're contracting some retail expertise to help develop a program with local shop owners, specifically at the moment within the Ipswich Central Precinct, but the learnings through the visual merchandising would be, I suppose, applicable across all small business owners in Ipswich.
Okay, so it's just more for the Ipswich CBD?
The contractor is informing an Ipswich CBD program of work, yeah.
Okay. And we can't, I guess, gather this information ourselves through our own resourcing, or?
They're a merchandising and retail expert, nationally recognised. They contributed to a couple of previous programs that we've run that has been across the LGA, not just Ipswich Central specific. So short answer is no, we don't have that commercial retail expertise in-house. But the team that are working on the program work closely with a range of consultants to help build the capability and capacity of local businesses. As I say, whilst this one's being applied specifically to Ipswich Central, the learnings are scalable.
Okay. I'm just conscious of the financial implications, that's all. But thank you very much, Mr. Pole.
Thank you, Ms. Pole. I'll open up for other discussion.
Just
Councillor?
noting, just wanting to be wise financially, I guess, looking at our main obligations as a local government and looking at the increase in some of the other contracts in the same committee. So even like your ground maintenance, looking at that contract for that extension of 2-year term is, I might be wrong with procurement, but it looks like an increase of around 43%. So just needing to manage finances properly and make sure that all and every dollar is spent exactly where it needs to be spent at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you. I think for my comment, I think each of these, we spent a fair bit of time at the Governance Transparency Committee going through each one of those procurements there, interrogating, going through them there as well. Because
I watched that. Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry.
I did watch the video.
I haven't finished. So we did go through a fair bit with that. And I think you see all levels of government, anyone in these type of projects, they're seeing those cost increases, which is, that we're managing. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's all except Councillor Jonick. Those against? Thank you. And Councillor Jonick's against. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 5, and I'll wait for Councillor Jonick to leave. Thank you. So, Chair of that committee, do you move that, item 5 of the GTC? Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Welcome back. We're now on to item 15.3, which is the report of the Community Culture Arts and Committee of the 12th of October 2023. I'll hand over to the Chair of that committee, Councillor Fector, to see how we'd like this report managed.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to move that Council adopts the report of the Community Culture Arts and Sports Committee, number 9 of the 12th of October.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any commentary or discussion?
In discussion, there was quite a lot on the agenda. Councillor Marnie Doyle and myself had 3 notices of motion to the committee, and these ranged from extremely strategic pieces of work that have been ongoing in council since our time here in 2020 to a really important community issue that we're facing down at Tony Merrill Park. So just on the notice of motion that we put forward for the establishment of an arts hub in Ipswich, that's something that's been really important to us for some years. We've heard, and we did discuss this at committee, that the Creators of Ipswich Summit, there's been a running theme of our creators wanting a space to actually progress their careers and space offered by the local government. So this is us really embedding our strategic vision into this notice of motion, which will ultimately culminate into allowing our creatives to use space. And the vision for the notice of motion is that we activate the space that was formerly Jamie's Kitchen down there with a view to think about what we do with Fire Station 101 and using that as a creative and business hub moving forward, and with a long-term view to assess, what are some of those options that we might have, in the 5 to 10 year horizon to invest some money into the woolen mills. So it's about that capacity building. It's the journey that we've been on for quite a few years now, and it's us, as a council, listening to our creatives who have been singing from the same songbook for quite some time, that they're pretty eager to have a space that they can be creative in. The second notice of motion that I'd like to speak to, and something that's very important to both Councillor Doyle and myself, but the entire city, the idea of council employing a specialist public space liaison officer. We know that there are lots and lots of people in our community who are facing the prospect of either living on the streets or have been living on the streets for a significant amount of time. There are camps of homeless people that are both visible to our members of community, but there is a hell of a lot of people that are not visible to our community, and they're living either in their cars or hidden down by the riverbanks. So the idea from Councillor Doyle and myself is to employ a specialist public liaison officer, public space liaison officer, to help us map and understand the very bespoke needs of our rough sleeping community, and to try and play a little bit more in the space of advocacy when it comes to us advocating for our people to the state government. So I see this role as critical in collecting data, in supporting our community to ensure that we know what the state of play is. And just as a general comment for the council this morning, I'd like to thank the CEO for actually reaching out to the CEO of Westmoreton Health, Hannah Block, to continue those conversations around advocacy to get to get a more of a response from the health services to our rough sleeping community, where we know that there is a lack of clinical support, that people are being discharged back into homelessness without the appropriate care that they need. So those conversations are ongoing. So from the idea of the specialist public space liaison officer, we've been able to already open some of those doors, which I think is really important to protect some of our most vulnerable people in the city. And speaking of, the last notice of motion that we brought is something that is a very hyper-local issue and extremely important to both Councillor Doyle and myself. And Councillor Doyle will probably speak to a few of these points herself, but since 2020, we've had issues with trail bikes in Tony Merrill Park down in Leichhardt. It is something that, while the Leichhardt 1 Mile Neighbourhood Watch was still up, was on the agenda every single month for discussion. And since then, it has been an off and on issue, which has resulted in violence against members of our community who are fed up of what's happening down there. So the introduction of a little bit of surveillance down there to try and help curb that behaviour that we're seeing is really great. We also heard from Councillor Madsen and Councillor Ireland that they're experiencing similar issues across their division as well with trail bike riders, where we don't really have a handle on that aberrant behaviour that we see and our community absolutely detests. There are so many negative impacts on our community, notwithstanding the noise, but also, as Councillor Doyle can speak to, one of our members of community was hospitalised because he decided to speak up against one of these violent trail bike riders. So it's a really important and ongoing issue for us and across the community. But I think that Councillor Madsen had a really good idea to say, yeah, let's look at this as an example and potentially roll it out across the city. You know, if we can use a bit of surveillance to curb the behaviour, we know that we've had cameras in Marburg recently. Tony Merrill Park would be a great opportunity for us to gather some data and see how we go in terms of monitoring those trail bike riders and hopefully work closely with QPS to curb that behaviour. So it was really busy at committee, but some really important work for our community that we've done. So I would like to implore my fellow councillors to support us the good work that we've been doing in the Community Culture, Arts and Sports Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, Chair. I really won't add to that. Councillor Fichtner has spoken obviously very eloquently as usual and very comprehensively. Just touch on, though, that the recurrent themes right across our notice of motion relate to the very, challenging economic times that we're in, as well as challenging social times with, antisocial behaviour and youth crime becoming a real issue right across the state, not only Ipswich. We know our police officers are under enormous pressure. We know our role within local government and our core responsibilities, but there is an opportunity to support the state potentially with few of these, preliminary programs, a bit of deterrence and ongoing surveillance. For instance, in a park with regard to trail bike riding may provide good outcomes for the community. And as Councillor Fichtner touched on, we acknowledge these aren't isolated issues within Division 3. They are issues right across Ipswich LGA. So hoping there will be benefits for the entire Ipswich community from these notices of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. I commend you. At the time, I commended you both for all three motions. With the Arts Hub, without a doubt, we set up the creators of Ipswich when we came in 2020, and we spent a lot of time with the creators in our community. We established a creative developments officer. We ensure that we have local artists in Spark, in Christmas in Ipswich, in Galvanise, and our city events. But what some of the feedback we've had from them loud and clear is that they have felt let arts hub. They want a creative space close to our CBD. There've been a lot of promises in the past, so I welcome this to have something that comes forward that is costed, so that's something that we can go into budget discussions and have realistic discussions and work with the creative community so they have that space to thrive and to bloom and just add so much to our community. So thank you very much for that. Again, support for the Specialist Public Space Liaison Officer. Whilst homelessness and housing, the health issues are state government responsibilities, you know, as leaders in our community, it'd be great for us to, I think this would be an important coordination to work with QPS, with Westmoreton Health, with housing, homelessness and community services. So anything we can do to support our community there, knowing that we don't get funding for these services, but I think knowing as Councillor Doyle said, the tightened economic times, we're going to need that. And obviously Tony Merrill Park, and it was discussed, I think, in Redback Plains, there's some hooning there in other areas as well. So yeah, this will be a very interesting trial. So thank you very much for bringing these forward, and I'll be supporting it. Again. Any other commentary on the CCAS reports? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And thank you. It's unanimous and carried. I note that it's 3 past 10, so I'll call for an adjournment, a 30-minute adjournment to come back at 10:33. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. So can I ask you to raise? So that's everyone except for Councillor Madsen. Those against? Councillor Madsen. Thank you. See you back at 10:33. Thank you very much. Welcome back. It's 10:33 and we continue with the Council Ordinary Meeting of the 26th of October 2023. We now move on to item 15.4, which is the report of the Economic and Industry Development Committee of the 12th of October 2023. And I'll hand over to the chair of that committee, Councillor Kunzelman, to see how you would like that report managed.
Thank you, Chair. I move that Council adopt the report of the Economic and Industry Development Committee number 9 of 2023 of the 12th of October.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. Any discussion? There's no discussion. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That's unanimous in the room and carried. We now move on to item 15.5, the report of the Environment Sustainability Committee of the 12th of October 2023. I'll hand it over to the chair of that committee, Deputy Mayor Milligan, to see how you'd like that report managed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the Council adopt the report of the Environment Sustainability Committee meeting number 9 of the 12th of October. Thank
you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There was only one officer's report contained in that committee meeting. Very timely one, though, being the 2023 to 2024 Annual Disaster Awareness Campaign. Timely by what we are actually seeing going on in South East Queensland at the moment with regards to natural disaster events. But I would also raise the point that one of those items that tends to often be forgotten is heat wave conditions, where there may not be visual prompts that something is going on, but our community need to be mindful to look after each other and remember to contact your neighbours, your relatives, particularly the elderly and infirm around us to make sure they're okay during those extreme weather and temperature conditions.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. On to item 15.6, the report of the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee of the 12th of October 2023. I'll hand over to... Oh, thank you, sorry. I'll hand over to the chair of that committee, Councillor Doyle, to see how you'd like this report managed.
Thank you, Chair. I move that Council adopt the report of the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee from the 12th of October.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any discussion?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I just want to call out the work done by the Nicholas Street precinct team. In September, they travelled to Sydney for the Connexu. It was a retail property marketplace down in Sydney. The team here at Council was representing the wider Ipswich region alongside partners such as JMK Retail, Hoyts and Colliers, and it was a very successful campaign down there selling Ipswich to the wider Australian retail market. So really, really grateful that the team are constantly advocating and telling the story here in Ipswich of our urban rejuvenation. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to item 16.1, which is the CEO Organisational Performance Report for September 2023. And I move the recommendation that the CEO Organisational Performance Report for the month of September 23 be received and the contents noted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. In discussion, I note some of the current significant matters in our council, in particular the Resilient Homes Fund and the enormous amount of work with the voluntary buyback scheme, which is a Commonwealth and state government funded scheme, and how our council's working very closely. But at the moment, 57 homes have been demolished or removed, and that's been a tremendous step forward for so many families in Ipswich. I note the draft Ipswich planning scheme has received a huge number of submissions, over 500 submissions, and I think that goes to the intense amount of public consultation. We did a longer than normal than legislative period of public notification and a lot of, I think, advertising about it earlier in the year to say that this was coming as well. So it's great to see that. And the team is working through those to make sure that every single person gets a response back from council. I also note the Customer Service Independent Report, and it was pleasing to see that independent industry experts, CSBA, have assessed council's customer report card, and our organisation was given an overall quality assurance score of 61.6%, which is higher than the 51.8%, which is a local government sector benchmark. So it's very pleasing to see those there. And obviously, as we see Snap, Send, Solve get more and more rolled out and those responses being quicker to our residents, it's quite exciting. So thank you very much. Does anyone else have any other comments or discussion? No? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you, CEO. The next is a pretty big one. It's the adoption of the 16.2, the adoption of the Ipswich City Council annual report for 2022-2023. Does anyone have any questions of the relevant council officers on the annual report? In that case, I'll move that the Ipswich City Council annual report 2022-2023 be adopted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. In speaking to this, the 2022-2023 annual plan, annual report, lays out our city's year ahead, lays out our city's performance that we've done in our future ahead, sharing our goals and plan on how council will deliver infrastructure, improve livability and grow our cultural vision. From the steady development of the refurbished city centre at Nicholas Street Precinct to the burgeoning new suburbs and our eastern, southern and western growth fronts, Ipswich is changing rapidly while still maintaining our heritage and our history. More than a year after the devastation of the February and May 2022 floods across our city, our efforts to rebuild have focused on fiscal responsibility and sustainability efforts that have been met with support from the community. In an innovative partnership with the Queensland Reconstruction Authority, Council has successfully helped 126 families so far finalise a voluntary buyback for their flood-prone homes. Colleges Crossing will be rebuilt with fewer permanent structures and a back-to-nature approach designed to reduce the economic and physical impacts of future floods, again with support from residents, because we know that area will flood again. One of our key goals is to implement our draft Ipswich plan in 2024 and our local government infrastructure plan to sustain Ipswich in the decades ahead. These two major pieces of work that are underway will guide future trunk infrastructure locations citywide and will set out a path for our rapid growth and will shape how our city will develop. Whether it's the maintenance of roads, collection of waste, operations of our libraries, assessing development applications, engaging with stakeholders and residents, or many of our support services, our city's core business services are reflected in this document. We are now in the final year of our 4-year term of council, and my fellow councillors and I are proud of the work that we have achieved, but there's still plenty more to be done. We look forward to working together with the community to complete the tasks ahead while celebrating what makes our city such a great place to live, work and play. Are there any other comments or discussion anyone would like to make? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Everyone but Councillor Madsen has voted. Those against? There's no one. Those abstaining? Councillor Madsen, thank you. We now move on to the monthly financial performance report for September 2023. Does anyone have any questions of the relevant council officer on this report? No? I'll recommend that the report on the council's financial performance for the period ending 30th September 2023, submitted in accordance with section 204 of the Local Government Regulations 2012, be considered and noted by council. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Now we have two notices of motion today. The first one, 17.1, is a notice of motion inclusion of plaques for dogs at dog parks, and this has been submitted by Councillor Jacob Madsen. I'll hand over to you, Councillor Madsen.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm happy to move it this morning. I'm actually presenting this today on behalf of Councillor Ireland, who can't be here. She was approached by Lee, who spoke to the council earlier. Ultimately, I ended up leaving what, in most parts does resemble an incomplete sort of starting point to start the debate, because it was hard to actually gauge on how to proceed forward with something like this. I think particularly small plaques that...
Point of order, Mayor, I think we need a seconder before the matter
Oh,
is
yeah.
considered
Sorry.
or debated.
So would you like to move the
Yeah,
motion?
sure.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Johnny. Thank you. So I'll hand over to you now, Councillor Madsen, as the mover.
Sorry, I don't necessarily think that small personal plaques like this should be covered by the Public Monuments and Memorials policy.
Okay.
I would just need to actually know if there's any appetite from the council to go down this path of letting people make small personal signage things in areas of significance for them. There's the broader context of whether or not it needs to extend to all animals. Yeah, it's impossible for me to know how to proceed on this matter without really knowing what everyone's appetite is for it. So I just seek that this morning, and then hopefully we can resolve a path forward as the council determines.
Thank you. Councillor Johnny, as the seconder, Councillor Johnny, would you like to make any comments?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tully.
Yeah, Mayor, I have a procedural motion that I've forwarded, which I will read when that goes up. That this matter and the matter raised at item 9 under public participation be referred to the Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee for further consideration, including 1, the proposed or possible location of plaques at each dog park, 2, the cost of production, installation and ongoing maintenance of such plaques, 3, whether or not, in the interests of general equity, the proposed policy amendment should be extended to include other animals such as, but not limited to, cats, birds and other pets which are deceased.
Thank you. So you're proposing this as an amendment. I'll just check with Councillor Madsen. Sorry,
well-
a procedural motion.
Well, no, not so much as an amendment as a procedural motion to shift both matters to the GIW committee for ultimate report back to council.
Yes. Thank you. So do you have someone to second that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Anyone wish to speak to that? Yes.
Just wanted to again highlight that they're not really like public memorial sort of plaques that we're talking about. So again, I don't really think that the relevant policy that's been highlighted is something. It could actually be a separate policy that's created. It could be a path forward. As I said, I think Lee mentioned 11.6 centimetres, quite small. It's not a big plaque talking about an extensive history of a site. Yeah. It's a relatively small personal one for personal reasons.
And I think Lee mentioned the size, 11.5 centimetres by
Yeah,
something.
11.5 centimetres.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the record, I just agree with, I guess, the questions that Councillor Madsen has raised. So, yeah, assuming and hoping the report that will go through to GIW will certainly address the appropriateness of it coming under that particular policy or potentially, yeah, as a standalone procedure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other commentary? Councillor Tully, would you like to say anything in
Just
closing?
thank the councillors for their comments, and I think the procedural motion that I've moved would facilitate the wide consideration of that either as part of the policy or another policy if depending upon what councillors wish.
Yep. Thank you. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I think it's unanimous and carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 17.2, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Kunzelman on a United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And there are two recommendations there. I'll hand over to you, Councillor Kunzelman. You wish to move it?
I move the notice.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Tully. Okay, I'll hand over to you, Councillor Kunzelman, to speak to it.
Just to speak to it, Chair. On the 12th of September this year, councillors were briefed by Dr Marianne Hansen, co-chair of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. The notice of motion supports the international campaign's objective of prohibiting and eliminating nuclear weapons and calls on Ipswich City Council to advocate to the Australian Government to sign and ratify the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Nuclear weapons are the most destructive, inhumane and indiscriminate weapons ever created, both in the scale of the devastation they cause and in their unique persistence, spread genetically damaging radio fallout. They are unlike any other weapon. It is the indiscriminate nature of the damage that makes nuclear weapons so much worse than conventional. There can be no pretence of merely targeting combatants, as in conventional weapons, but causing death and destruction in the civilian population. There is the immediate death of many and the collapse of infrastructure. Then there is the firestorm. Following this is the spread of ionising radiation and the very long-term effects produced, poisoning the environment, producing long-term health consequences, and including cancer and genetic damage. Their widespread use just in testing has caused grave long-term consequences. The use of nuclear weapons by one country and the response of another country will produce a terrifying scenario of mutually assured destruction and a disaster way beyond their boundaries. Our action here today may seem a small gesture in a complex international negotiation. Some would argue that this is not the business of a local government. I would argue that this is an opportunity to add our voice to persuading the federal government to move more quickly towards influencing the elimination of nuclear weapons, particularly in light of increasing geopolitical instability. The residents of Ipswich deserve more certainty of a nuclear weapons-free future, and I urge councillors to vote for this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Tully is the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'll be fairly brief. I note in the background to the motion that's been put up by Councillor Kunzelman, there's a reference to the Ipswich being the first city in Queensland to be declared a nuclear-free zone in December 1982. In fact, we were the second council in Queensland. It was Pine River Shire Council, which happened to be the first, but we were the first city, followed by Brisbane and Townsville and others in Queensland. I certainly support the arguments put forward by Councillor Kunzelman. You only have to look to World War II in 1945 at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You know, the tremendous of the atomic bomb that was dropped there, bombs, plural, of how devastating it can be. This motion seeks to get a worldwide position. Very few, if any, countries would be prepared to unilaterally not have any of these weapons because of the threats from other countries. But I think it's a long-term plan, a long-term strategy, and hopefully with world peace sometimes being fractured more and more, it's just something that we as citizens of our nation should be prepared to put our position forward so that eventually a worldwide position through the United Nations may be able to be achieved with the abolition of nuclear weapons. It will be a very, very difficult process to engage and get the agreement of all nations, but from Australia to others, let's try to make this a reality for future generations.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Sure.
I just want to clarify that this has got nothing to do with nuclear power.
Yes, nuclear weapons. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman, for raising this issue with Council today and for bringing forward a matter that's really important to you. We know that nuclear weapons are a global problem and there's a global effort to progress the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons after the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons launched in 2007. The ideal situation is that no country has nuclear weapons. In 1996, I holidayed in Japan, and as part of that visit, I went to Hiroshima and visited the museum there, walked around the town there and chatted with people there to see the impacts. And whilst I personally believe that the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was needed to end World War II and save millions of lives, my personal view is that we need to make sure that there are no nuclear weapons. And so I'll be supporting this motion to work towards a future free from nuclear weapons for the betterment of mankind around the world. Is there any other commentary? Councillor Kunz, would you like to say anything in closing? I'll go straight to the vote.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to emphasise that there is no argument that this is not a local government matter. This is a human, international issue that we should all support.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Are there any questions on notice? No? In that case, I'll close the meeting at 10:54. Thank you very much.